the sticky notes to give input. And we're excited about this process. This is really the first step in getting input to help craft these documents. So with that, you know, if anybody has any questions, of course, we're here to, you know, we can answer some of those. Or if you've got other input or just things you want to talk about with your community, and how we can make it better and how we can be a part of it, that's what we're here for. It's sort of interactive and kind of drop in, so don't want y'all feeling like you have to hang out here the whole time if you don't want to. Of course, there is the council meeting starting at 7 if you want to do that. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Would really encourage you to participate with the sticky notes. That's how we get input. And if you haven't signed in yet, please do so, so that we know who's been here.
I have a question.
Sure thing.
When you're doing the zoning, do you do it by the population of the streets or however many people are in a certain area? We've got two streets that I know of, Diamond Head and Scenic, that are very, very windy and long. Would you, like, section those off?
Yeah,
I don't understand how you do it.
Sure. So it'll be something we look at as we go through this process. We'll look at the different streets. We'll look at, you know, what their current use is. Through the input, we'll look at what the community wants future uses to be, and take all of that into consideration. So some of the streets, you know, may be zoned the same thing, and some may not. But that'll be through that process. Through this input process is where we get that input to help us figure out how to make that plan and what that ends up looking like.
Is it like population on certain streets or certain areas?
It's not really population, more of just what the use of the property is and then what the future use of it will be, is what it's looking at.
Could you explain the categories of zoning? What kind of zones are there?
Yeah.
Because I don't really know anything about zoning.
Sure,
So.
that's a great question. So, honestly, in a lot of cities, there can be a numerous amount of zones, sometimes too many zones. Standard though, there's usually, you know, some commercial zones, some residential zones, you know, there's multifamily, that can be zoned for that. You know, you have zones for it, you can have commercial zones, you know, you have several different kinds of zones, really depending on how you want your community, want your city to grow and what you want it to grow into. All of that is dictated by that.
And
So
all
what are the zones that are being discussed?
We really haven't gotten to that point yet. That's what we're doing tonight, is figuring out what those zones are through this input and through what the community wants to see. Like, that's what we'll go back and look at and then start building, you know, not just the zoning code, but the zoning map.
We have zoning codes now?
No.
Fred, you might also mention the things that have to get done first, land use and the street.
Certainly, yes, sir. So as a part of state code, you have to have a land use plan and you have to have a master street plan. And those are the things that we're also working on through this process to ultimately culminate in then what can be a zoning code. So that future land use plan is a plan that not necessarily dictates, but is a roadmap for your zoning code. So with the zoning code, you're gonna have a zoning map. And those two things work together as you go through zoning changes that could occur in your community. And your street plan is a little bit more straightforward than a zoning plan is, as far as that is your map of your city streets. Understand y'all are in a bit of a unique situation with your city streets. So that's something that you have to plan for from the state laws in order to have a zoning code. So that would be something that we work through. Yes, ma'am.
Do you intend to use Diamond as an original plan for that?
Yes. So that was some of the feedback we got from the mayor, is to consider that as we go through this process.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure thing. It was to consider, as we're going through this, consider Diamond Head's original format. And of course, if there isn't a comment up there on our board yet about that, and that is something that you wanna see as a community, we need to see that on the board. Because it's that kind of public input that we need to hear, so that when we go back and create all this documentation, that it matches up with what the viewpoint of the community is. So that's certainly something we can take into consideration. Yes, sir?
You might start off with a good definition of exactly what zoning is and what zoning does.
Yeah.
Because some of the questions are kind of indicating that some people don't fully understand that.
Yes, sir. So zoning, maybe a way to think about zoning is, if you take your entire community, every piece of property inside of it will have a zone. You can think of a zone as a classification. And in that, that will be the map portion, and then you'll have a document that helps support that map. So if there's a zone that is just residential, there'll be a definition in the code that describes what that is. And then ultimately, what all of this is a roadmap for you as a community to understand how your community is going to continue to develop and possibly change, depending on the input that you give it. But then also, as development does occur, they understand the rules that you set forth as a community that then they have to abide by. So there's a protection part, but then there's also a straightforward part for how does one do development in your community. And both of those things are equally as important.
And who's ultimately deciding on what zones are gonna be where? Is that gonna be a vote, or how do you get to the end result?
Yes, that's great. End result will be through the city council. In a lot of other communities, of which Diamond Dead does right now have a planning commission, this would go through the planning commission and then to the city council. I understand right now, which is as part of the growing up process, the council is also the planning commission. So it'll go through those bodies, which happens to be one body right now, but they will be the ones to approve it once it gets to that level.
How does that impact those areas that have not been annexed yet?
So the zone, that's another great question. The zoning can only take place in areas that are inside the city limits. So as a part of this, we're looking at the entire community with the understanding that of the annexations that are to come. But those things, those plans can't take effect until they're in the city limits itself. So we want to get that input from those individuals that live there, in the understanding that the annexations are on the way.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the residential lots will stay residential. It's just the public or the green areas that could change.
Yeah, well, I think all of that is to be taken into consideration, and all of that should be input that's given, if you have that input. Because this is a process, right, and we're working through it.
And another thing that we're also not gonna do, just if this is the concern that's coming forward, we're not gonna come in and come to you at your property and say, hey, this is no longer your residential property. We're not gonna do that. Our goal is also not to come in, we understand the scope of this community. We're not gonna come in and throw something way out there that we know is not a development that you would like to see. That is not our goal. Our goal is to get a product that everyone enjoys. We're not trying to interject any kind of zoning on you that you would not anticipate or want to see.
Yeah, that's a great point. Ultimately, like, what makes, I think, my job cool, our job cool, is that we come into communities and we get this input, and then we help communities develop into what they want to develop into. Like, how do you want to see your community in 10 years, in 15 years, in 20 years? You know, that's the kind of roadmap that these documents take. And yes, you know, planning never happens quickly. We do it, and then it's a time frame of change that has to occur. But, you know, the best time to make a plan is yesterday. The second best time is today. So that's what we're getting started here.
Is there a minimum amount of zoning that is required to establish what Diamond Head is trying to do? Like, do they have to have just residential, or are there other zonings that has to be there to move forward?
Yeah, so via state law, there are a number of things that have to be in a zoning code. And I think that's maybe what we're talking about here. The list off, I couldn't list it all off the top of my head of what has to go in there. But there are certain qualifications in order to have a zoning code. It has to, certain things have to be in that document, and you have to allow for them.
Yeah, and I'll just repeat for those who came in, because I mentioned it earlier, but you may have missed it, but, you know, as the city, what we're interested in doing is being able to, you know, protect and manage things like the community wants. And so we're trying to look at kind of where it is now, and what of that do we want to maintain, but then have options for changes in case there's more commercial or there's more other things that come in. But then we, as a city, would manage that as things come up based on that definition and the zoning. And we can change the zoning depending on what comes up. But it's something that we have in place then, that we have the mechanism to manage and be sure that we're living the community that we want it to be.
That's 100% correct. So one way to think about this as well is once these documents are in place, you know, to a certain degree, they're set in stone in law, but that does not mean they can't be changed. I think that's what makes this process unique, is that as the community evolves, you know, you go back through these processes again to make sure that's what is happening in community is something that you want to happen. Or, you know, perspectives may change and you may want different things to occur. And that's why these documents aren't exactly living, but they're something that should be looked at time and time again. Yes, ma'am.
As a city, is it required zoning wise that you have commercial zoning or multi-use zoning?
You have to allow for certain things to occur. So like commercial, there has to be areas where these things
There
can
has to
occur.
be a certain amount, is it?
There's not necessarily a certain amount.
Okay,
It's just something you have to allot for.
okay. And what about multi-use?
Multi-use, as far, I mean,
Okay, let's say you have.
okay, I just wanted to, there's a lot of jargon that goes along with some of this. But yeah, like multifamily, it's something that state law has said that you have to allot for, as in your community, via zone.
So it would be like duplexes would be considered.
Yeah, it would,
Multifamily, it wouldn't have to be a high-rise.
certainly, right.
And we already have some, you know, we already have some apartments and condos there that would be.
We have condos.
Yes, ma'am.
So, how hard is it to, like, for instance, we delegate a certain area to be, commercial, just say for example.
Yeah.
How hard is it to change that once that is established?
So once it's established, and there'll be a process set forth in the code. So the code will say, this is how you change the code. What that process most likely will look like is, there'll be an application to the city to rezone this property, and then it will go very much similarly back through the process of what we're doing. There'll be a public hearing, it'll go to planning commission, and then it'll go to city council for approval. So it'll still go through that process, but inside of that will be mandatory public outreach, so that people understand what's happening in the community with a change like that.
And another thing that's important to add too with zoning is just because we are mandating a zone there does not always necessarily mean that you will see a building there. That is just the qualification of the parcel if there was development. So that does not necessarily mean that you're gonna get, you know, huge high rises or anything like that. It would have to have an interest from people that were developing on that site and have to acquire the site. Does that make a little more sense for it? So just because it's qualified as that does not necessarily mean you will have direct development on that. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Might add too, that it gives you a roadmap to put infrastructure in,
Certainly.
so that if you're in a commercial zone or a residential zone, high-rise zone, you have the specific fire fighting capabilities and water lines and so forth.
And an expectation of that, right, and
Yeah.
understanding, because there's totally different infrastructure for a
Yeah.
commercial site than a residential
Right.
site. You're talking about, yeah, significantly more. You had a question?
Yes, so you were saying that there's not a specific amount of land or area that has to be zoned a certain way,
Right.
but you have to allow for a process to make it zoned that, you know, in certain ways. So you said you were talking about allotting, so how can you be required to allot certain amounts to a certain thing without requiring, I'm confused.
Yeah, well, and it is one of the trickier parts about, like, doing a new zoning code for a community that hasn't had zoning before, right? Is, state law says, because you have to treat everybody equally and uses equally, and then state law says that you have to have certain uses, you have to allot for certain uses in your community. Or you could have legal issues with that. Because at the end of the day, all of this is an ordinance, all of this is law. So you have to have certain areas where uses can occur. Now, you can then have rules around how those uses work in your community, but you have to give right to the public.
I would want, and I'm pretty sure everybody will agree, I love the fact that it requires public input in order to change anything. I like it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best parts about this process. Yes, ma'am.
You said earlier that there are some basic things that needs to be completed for the zoning and things. That, what are some of the improvements that you would think, the recommendations that your company would make right now for our community that would be basic for us to meet the zoning requirements?
I think, well, I don't want to confuse the things that are required by state law in order for the city to have a zoning code, because I think that's what I was alluding to more earlier.
Right.
Is the state law requires that you have a future land use plan and a master street plan. So you have to have those documents in order to have a zoning code. So you can't have a zoning code if you don't have those two. So those two things are what we're also working on through this process and through this input. Does that make sense? Did I answer? Okay.
And just to reiterate, they just started looking at this. This is the first opportunity for, public input. Whatever everybody puts here, and will gather, they'll look at that and work with these processes, and then they'll come back where we'll do this again, but they'll say, based on the inputs and what we're doing, here's what we would recommend, and we can change that.
Yep.
But it's a process where we get to an ordinance that we can pass and say, this is what we want to work with, and it'll also be flexible, like we said, it can be changed. But we put something in place with the best inputs we can.
But I think that what I would be concerned about is if I had a piece of land next to me that was empty, that I don't necessarily want a multifamily home
Yeah.
there.
Right.
And I think that's a concern that a lot of us would feel like, even though we're not object to that, but still.
Yeah.
For our land location. So what kind of input, are you saying that through the meetings and things like that?
Or adding
there
on
would be
sticky
time
notes
Yeah.
for?
that
You guys are in here on the ground floor, where you have an opportunity to ruminate on this, bring your ideas forward, pass them on to these folks, and work with the whole process. A lot of places don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, so I'd say, like, that's an excellent thing to put on a sticky note, to get up here on our board, so that we can understand that, as when we go back and start looking into this and figuring out what the code should say.
So what does this timeframe look like?
So the timeframe, we're hoping to take the input that's here and go back and over the next month, create a draft document. And then at that point, hopefully in that next, 2 to 3 weeks, come back and have another public meeting, where we can then talk about what the code looks like and what the map looks like and get input from that. Hopefully teeing up, getting an approval from the planning commission / city council. Yes.
Have certain companies or entities expressed an interest in developing commercial operations here?
I would not know that answer to that question, Mayor.
Nothing else that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I mean, we have the existing, it's not, those places.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Kind of a strange question.
The best.
Sometime within a year, we got sent around through our email this project that was called Diamond Head Beautification 2.0. I think it came from the Omni group, and it was a complete layout of Diamond Head, as far as where they were gonna have streets, and where the apartments, where houses, the whole
are they gonna coexist? I guess it's probably.
Well, it's like a lot of things, as you know, there's a couple lawsuits going on that may impact some of it, but right now, we're just looking at, you know, honestly, the situation has been is that, we don't usually talk because of the lawsuits. I've reached out, but they've said, as long as lawsuits are here, we can't talk. So as a city, we're going to do whatever we need to do. That's kind of the thing.
Since we don't have any zoning now, can they just start building?
No.
Okay. Then my second question.
Now, let me quantify it. If we get a zoning in place, we will manage what we do in the community.
I wouldn't want somebody just to come in and start building without this plan in place. And is zoning where we put in requirements like signage, like for commercial signage can't be higher than us, and you have to plant trees, and
Certainly.
it has to, you can't use like super ultra modern, okay.
All of that is stuff that we can take into effect. I mean, all should be stuff, if you have ideas on that, to get on our board. Yes, ma'am.
Back to that project, the reason I'm really asking, part of this project was to put in a theme park, like on top of the Mystic Heights up there,
Yeah.
which is right behind my house. And so is there going, would there possibly be a plan like that to put in too?
I'm not aware of that plan, but if those are things that you don't want, that could also be something that could go on the board. Or if you do want that could go on the board.
Yeah, a large portion of that plan has to do with infrastructure outside of our gates too.
I'm sorry.
A lot of that plan is infrastructure, has, retail and other projects going on outside the gates.
Okay.
It's a little bit, as I understand it, it's hard, there's nothing happening in 8 years after a plan.
And the city is not just
We
inside
can't
the
hear
gates.
what he's saying.
It's on a
We can't hear what he's saying.
Stand over there.
Sorry.
You probably need to repeat the question.
Yes.
Because everybody can't hear the question.
Yeah, where does Diamond Head extend to, I guess?
Okay, I was gonna say, if you look on this map over here, if you wanna kind of point out where we currently are, it's the Garland County side, but it goes down to almost where we're at now, is the city limits.
Okay.
And then it goes up where you actually go in, but you can see all the south side there, and then the red parts there is the commercial area up there, just before the entrance. And so, but now, right now, if you take that bottom right line, it almost goes up. And on the left of that, we are city. To the right of that, we're not yet, except for that little island up there that's in Garland County.
Okay.
So, but on the March 3rd ballot is a piece where he's outlining there now, that we propose to be annexed. And so they'll be on the ballot, and it'll be on the Garland County side and the Hot Spring County side, and both sides independently have to pass it. And once that passes, then for November, we would be looking at annexing the rest of it. So we'd be a whole Diamond Head community again within the city. Other questions on this?
Yeah, so if that goes through, then what county is Diamond Head gonna be in?
It'd be in both. So we have just like it is now, we have a Garland County side and a Hot Spring County side. We have that with the city too. That's not a problem. Other cities cross county boundaries.
So our counties would not change?
No.
Just would be within the city?
No. County stays same, but they could both pieces be in the city.
And your county tax rates will probably be different too, as they are now.
And Diamond Head Church will be an election facility.
Yeah,
We
right
will
here.
have voting here on the election day. So
And that's especially helpful for the Hot Spring County side because there is none that's really close to here. They have to go farther away. And so the election commission, as we were talking to them, is talking now with the church and has set up an agreement to have this as a voting place for both Garland County and Hot Spring County. So when you come in, there'll be a Garland County side and a Hot Spring County side that people can vote here.
And that'll be for future elections as well as
It's not just this one, it's for the future.
Wherever, as long as it's open, it's like close, this will be an election spot.
Whenever we're talking about voting, I like to remind people, in Arkansas, you can vote anywhere in your county.
Yes.
So, you can take the closest place or the furthest away, it doesn't matter.
Any other questions?
In zoning,
Want to go back here first?
Maybe more so for Ralph, how do I differentiate, once we start looking at selecting aldermen, how does that integrate with this in any way, or is that a completely separate?
That's a separate, I mean, the zoning is not an issue there. Right now, we're just at large, which means everybody votes from everywhere.
Right.
But eventually, we would look at separating those into wards. And, but that's something we can work later. We've got that one plate at the moment, so. Yeah, but it won't affect
Yeah,
this.
turn it into all, okay.
does condition of roadways affect zoning?
No, so condition of.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, so does the condition of roadways affect zoning? The roadways themselves, you know, I think that's something you look at when you look at zoning, making sure that the use there, you know, you have a roadway that can sustain that use. But the condition itself, no. That's something that we can give maybe a brief look at when doing the master street plan, that dictates what the roads should look like. But it doesn't, the condition, not so much, no.
Okay, I didn't know if the state had regulations about how wide roads should be.
They do have that, so there's certain things in the state fire code that dictate how wide or really how small is what they're concerned about. It's not really, not that they'd let you build a road as big as you'd want, but they only let you get so small.
Because I know they need to have access to fire equipment, right?
Exactly, and that's the point of the rule that they have in the fire code, is to make sure that a fire truck can access a residence or an establishment. Yes, sir.
Once the zoning is in place, will the POA have to follow any zoning rules if they want to change or build anything?
So, once the zoning's in place, it becomes, an ordinance becomes law for the city. So those rules would be, that anybody that develops inside the city would have to follow those rules.
Thank
Yes, sir.
Yeah, maybe it's more for Ralph. Ralph, it's a little fuzzy on the roads, who own the roads, et cetera. And I'm hearing you say that the street plan is part of the package to present. So my question is, will all of this, and especially the street plan, be contingent upon the outcome of some of these lawsuits?
I don't think so. I mean, the main thing about the street plan is that you have to define, what we're really looking at is defining what we actually have now in a legal sense, so that establishes that. So we're not looking at adding to that or changing that or anything right now. It's just something we have to have in terms of the definition. So these guys are taking the maps and what's in the courthouse and defining what that street map is. But really just officially mapping out what's already here.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And maybe to take it just a step further with a street plan, in communities that would also dictate if there were future streets. Like maybe there's a street that you don't have that you'd like to have. You could put that on the street plan. That's where you would want to have that. Or if there's a street that you don't own that you would, at some point like to own, you can put that on the street plan. So really it's just establishing to both the community and the development community what you want your street infrastructure to be and to look like.
Okay,
Does that
thank
make
you.
sense? Okay.
Yes, thank you very much.
Great, yeah.
And in your future building streets, they have to meet certain specifications.
Right.
If it's written into the plan. So
Yeah.
that's a key thing there too.
If
Yes,
you're,
ma'am.
if you're in, Hot Springs County and say it doesn't pass to be annexed, what are the negatives that will occur to us?
Well, right now, one thing is that in the beginning, the group that started looking at incorporation anyway, tried to incorporate both counties at the same time. It's difficult just with working with, there's so many different people you have to interface with, and the two counties was end up pointing at each other on things, and So they ended up just doing the Garland County side. I think as far as a community, I feel like everybody wants to be, and everything I've been hearing has all been positive to being in the city. If it doesn't pass, then nothing changes. And so the things that we're trying to do, like the building codes and inspections and possibly future for roads grants and for, security, and of course, we're working toward city marshal office, with after our current security. And, none of that would then go to the Hot Spring County side.
Okay.
So, and we have no taxes, so there is no additional cost. You know, as far as the budget for the city, what we get is the state turns back money to the cities on a per capita basis. You know, out here, we've been paying taxes for years, and because it's been private, nothing we pay in taxes comes back in here as far as the roads and things that the counties would help pay for and all. As a city, that changes, and so we did our budget, last time, it'll be, our projection based on what we got this year is a little over $400,000, that we can then put into the community. So that's what would help. If we get additional from the Hot Spring County side, then they will get those services as well as the different population, we'd get additional turnback money then. And so, but to answer your question, if it doesn't pass, things stay the same and none of those services would go to the Hot Spring County side.
Well, I think you can answer this better. I'm concerned about the three areas, and my house is right here.
Okay.
And this is Mystic Heights.
Right.
And right here, it calls it unnamed PBT. What does that mean?
Right.
And
So-
what will you do with this type of land? Is it still part of the city, and will you have access to
Yes.
building on it?
So that name, probably comes from just county data. So the majority of this map was built off of data that we got from the two counties. So the name that populates on there, is either like an ownership name or just a placeholder that the county has in there right now.
So is this still part of Diamond Head?
Yes, it is still part of Diamond Head.
And it's up to, like, the city to choose, or us to choose what to develop here?
Right, that's what this process is, yes ma'am.
Because this is right in my backyard. I mean, you just go down the hill and it's right
Right.
there, so I'm really concerned about
If
that.
you wanted to make an input, be too on here.
2 or 3, huh?
We got a whole stack, and I got more sticky notes if we run out of the sticky notes that we got out there. That'd be-
Unnamed PBT.
That'd be perfect,
Thank you.
no problem. Yes.
So if land belongs to the developer, and even if we do win the lawsuit, that land he still owns that land. So we couldn't change any of that.
But you would have to follow the rules of the city.
Right.
You would have to follow
As you
the
go down every city
ordinance.
that's developed.
Right,
Or like the POA bylaws are the only guidelines you have, right?
right.
In any city, people own property and they have lots and stuff. But the zoning allows, if there's something you want to segregate in one area,
Right.
you do that. It doesn't let people just pop up with anything. And so the zoning, even though they own it, it basically rules what they could do with it. If they want to do something different, they can come to the city council and we can evaluate the goodness of that for the community and make a change or not. But, yeah, they can't just do anything.
So how about like the swimming pool area and all that? Is that developer land or city?
So that's something that we would take into account as probably its own zone, right? That's a unique use there. Same for like the area that's the golf course. All of that would get zoned a specific zone. Just because of its use now, and then through, if there's any input about any of that can get on the board, like we can take that into consideration. But for the most part, uses like that will have their own specific use that aren't really, they're not commercial, right, and they're not residential, something unique. And we can take that into account as we're developing the plan. Something else to think about with zoning, and as far as the rules, it's rules everybody has to follow, right? everybody here is probably a property owner, or, you know, lives in Diamond Head. So when these rules go into place, it's rules that then everybody has to abide by. Which is why it's important that we do these public comment periods. We have these meetings to garner this input, so that when we come up with a plan, it's a plan that we all, you know, everybody wants to be a part of and use. Yes, ma'am.
I think the question was really, does the golf course belong to the city, or does the golf course belong to the developer?
Belongs to the POA.
Right, and
Which
none
is
of
entirely different from the developer. The developer owns the lots out here,
Right.
does not own the POA.
and none of this process really does anything as far as ownership goes, you know?
In zoning, how does zoning, I know that a number of homes within Diamond
Those
Head
are two different.
are now Airbnbs. How does that affect, does that fall under residential zoning or commercial?
So Airbnbs is the law and others refer to them as short-term rentals.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry,
It's-
thank you.
It's very hard to.
Yeah, so the question was on, what we call short-term rentals, but you probably know them as the company names of like Airbnb or VRBO. So those short-term rentals, again, there's certain rules that you have to abide by there. Those uses are still residential, for the most part. I think for Diamond Head, we can probably speak to that definitively. It gets murkier in other communities, right? But it's still, those single-family residents that are being used as that, or those duplexes would still fall into whatever use the structure is.
And let me just say, I've not really gotten any particular input, but, we have not a plan right now to address those kinds of things. But if people feel like that those are in some way a hindrance, or they'd like to maybe even enhance that some way, those kind of comments would be good up here, so we understand what kind of things people are interested in and want, because right now we're not addressing that, so.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So will the zoning impact, not so much architectural controls, but like how many trees that need to be maintained, what percentage of green space stays, what are the major charms of this place?
Yeah, so those are things that we can,
Repeat the question.
I'm sorry. I'll get in the rhythm, I'll get in the rhythm here at some point, maybe at the end. But the question was on trees and green space, and are those things that can be accounted for in the zoning code? And they can be, that is things that we can look at. There are certain rules that you have to abide by as far as development goes, with like a landscaping plan. But those are things that we can look at, and if you have input on that, you can get it on a sticky note, get it on the board.
The key thing is you have a voice here tonight, you have a voice down the road in order to impact any of these things. We don't have that all the time in every situation, so this is something that's really important.
Any others? This has been great. I really appreciate how tuned in everybody is on this topic. I've been to some community meetings where nobody shows up, and then there's very little input, and you're kind of left, trying to figure out what to do. So this has been great. I appreciate everybody that's here and also that's been involved in it.
And let me say that we're scheduled to start the city council meeting here in about 10 minutes. So as we've been talking about this stuff, as you think about things in the next 10 minutes or even later, I don't know what time you're going to take down and stuff.
We'll run it straight up till
Okay,
city
well, anyway,
council if you want.
but anyway, as you think about something, get to these sticky notes and this is what we'll work from. If you think of something later, I would say email it to Tina and at the city office. And if you don't know her email, it's tina.stauffer, STAUFFER, at, all this is together, city of Diamond Head AR.gov. And you can send her, and we can add some other things as they come in.
Utilize the webpage too.
Yes, it's all
Did
there on the
anybody
website.
not sign the sign-in sheet?
I did.
First and then I'll.
Okay.
Kathy, do you have a question?
No, I.
Oh, the signage. Signage, okay. All right, and we really do appreciate everybody's interest, and maybe this has got you thinking more, and so like I said, if you have more inputs, send them, and what do you say, just look at the website? 'Cause-
The email stuff's on the website.
Okay, I'm sorry, yes, the email stuff's on the website, and website is just that end part of the email, cityofdiamondheadar.gov. Put that in, our website will come up, and it has actually, the map for the annexation, and the annexation ordinance, and all of our ordinances and resolutions and stuff on there, so you can find that there. Okay, thanks a lot, everybody. If you have more inputs, please come up and add them. Thank you.
And all you folks, talk to your neighbors,
For the city
tell them
council.
about what's going on.
So this is
Give them a
about
call.
size time.
We'd love to see you here at the next meeting.
Probably about